Right now, I'm going to switch over to our gates of trust, which we're doing on an expedited level. We're moving it quickly forward because we're moving into whole new terrain. Today, we're going to touch into a new topic. It's actually not just touching. We're going to go quite detailed into a new topic that we don't really get to hear so much. It's about the world to come, where we go from here. Why is it that the Torah really speaks so little about the rewards of the world to come? It's an interesting question, because if what we do for the sake of the reward, then it would be a little strange why the Torah doesn't tell us any details about the world to come. It's very strange. Why would the Torah not tell us the promises of the world to come? It seems that the Torah only seems to tell us promises of life in this world. Like in this week's Torah portion that we just read in the Hayom Yom, it says, if you will walk in my statutes and I'll give you rain in their times, there will be peace in the land. And if you don't, then you're going to get all sorts of curses in this world. It seems that the Torah is only talking in this world. And you can almost understand why it is that some Reform rabbis, I guess, would say that the Torah does not believe in the afterlife. Because it's certainly not explicit in the written Torah. It is all over the oral Torah, but it's certainly not explicit in the written Torah. So what is going on over here? That's what we're going to be talking about in just a moment. Where I am starting today is we are in the middle of the seven needs that a person turns to God for. Just to quickly summarize them: health, wealth, and matters pertaining to people around you. We've discussed all of those in great length. There was mitzvahs pertaining to yourself, duties of the heart. We've spoken about that too. And today where we're starting off is mitzvahs, it's number 5, mitzvahs pertaining to involving other people. And then we're going to jump into 6 and 7, which is the reward in the world to come. And the bonus, the reward of your actions in the world to come. And then the extra reward, which is in store for us in the world to come. So we're going to go through those today. We're going to start with 5, which is the mitzvahs relating to other people. Then we're going to jump into the reward in the world to come. So when we look at what page are we on right now? In the book, in the book over here, I'm moving very quickly in here. So we're covering a lot of ground. Here it is. Okay, we're on page 433 is where I'm starting in the gates of trust today. So when we look at the 5th group, the external duties that affect others as well for benefit or for harm, such as the practice of charity, giving of tithes. And by the way, giving of tithes is a Jewish concept. They got it from us and not vice versa. Remember, Christianity is only 2,000 years old. Islam is 1,500 years old. The Torah was written 3,332 years ago, which speaks about tithing. So certainly they got it from us. Warning against evil, returning deposits, keeping a secret, speaking well of others, doing favors, honoring parents. All of these mitzvahs involve other people. Leading the wicked back to God, showing people the way that is right for them, pitying the poor, treating them with mercy, patiently bearing people's scorn when urging them to God's service, encouraging them to do what is right, by holding out to them the hope of reward and deterring them from wrong through fear of or punishment. What the Rabbeinu Bachai is going to tell us today is that we have to remember that we're just a conduit for the blessing of God. The proper way of relying on God in this regard is to keep the thought of all these and of similar activities in one's heart, to resolve to do them and pursue them in accordance with his duty to exercise free choice. Right? His sole aim should be to draw near to God, not to make a name or win honor for himself. So it shouldn't be that you're helping other people for your own sake, but you're doing that as an emissary for God. Then, having done his utmost, he should put his trust in God, that he will be enabled to accomplish what he had intended to do in accordance with his will. So there's 2 manners in which you have to have your trust here. Number 1 is with regards, when you realize that what you're doing is for the sake of God, then it's not for yourself aggrandizement, number 1. Number 2, you know that you're not ever truly capable of guaranteeing the result. Therefore, you have to trust in God that he'll bless the work of your actions. Okay? just to wrap up this idea, when the Creator brings about a good deed through his agency, he should consider it a favor to himself from the Creator. May he be exalted. That God did a kindness with you to allow you to be the agent of good. He should neither rejoice when people praise him for it, nor desire that they honor him for it, because this would make him proud of his actions. It would be all about me, and it's really not about you. You're just the agent. His heart's devotion and purity of intention would be spoiled. The deed would be ruined, and its reward lost. I will elaborate on this later in the appropriate gates with God's help. Now remember, the duties of the heart is divided into various gates. We're studying the gate of trust. There are other gates that he goes through, which we're not really going through in this semester. So just let it be known that there are other gates in duties of the heart in which he does address these very interesting matters. Remember, folks, we'd love to hear your comments and thoughts. If you'd like to interject with a comment here on YouTube or Facebook, we always love to hear from you. Welcome to Susan on YouTube, and to Rochelle Saunders, to Daniel Geiker, Adrian Hennigman. Good morning, Rabbi. I fed a small village in the Philippines today. I am not surprised, Daniel. I know that you're always helping people. Anybody needs assistance with paycheck protection program, please call Daniel. He's tremendous, very, very well connected in this regard. I'd like to welcome Sarah and Adrian and Daniel. Oh, he actually sent me pictures. I'm looking forward to seeing them. And to Mark Gottlieb, thank you. Good to have you with us. I hope you'll enjoy today's Torah study. Okay, good. So now we're going straight into the next world, which is this big topic that we rarely talk about. It's the number 6 and 7 of the 7 items for which we need to turn to God. We don't talk about it so much because we're so busy worrying about our money and our health and our politics. We don't really have time, clarity of headspace to be able to get to worrying about where we go after this world. It takes a tremendous amount of wealth and resources to have the clarity of mind to be able to think so far ahead that you're wondering what's going to be in the next world. Like, in Pesach, we have the Afikoman. Why do we have an Afikoman? Because the poor people, they all that they were worried about was the slaves, in Egypt. They were worried about tomorrow. So they would save the food for tomorrow, right? That's why they would hide a little broken piece of bread. And that's how we remember that we were slaves in Egypt, by having an Afikoman. Because all he can really worry about is tomorrow. He's got so many problems on his head, he can only worry about the next 24 hours. It's somebody who's rich, like us. Right? Somebody who's living a privileged life that has the ability to worry about where do I go after this world. By the way, remember that the Afikoman is itself another manifestation of the doctrine of trust, because when the Jews were in the desert, they were eating the manna that fell down from heaven, and they were not allowed to leave it overnight, as much as they wanted to leave it overnight in order to give them a sense of financial security that would allow them to sleep better at night. They were not allowed to do that because they had to go to sleep at night permeated with saturated with the trust that tomorrow morning God will provide for me all over again. And that was the birth of our nation. That was the education of our nation, that through 40 years in the desert, every single night we went to sleep with 0 resources. We had finished eating. The pantries were bare, going to sleep empty in the desert, so that the next morning we'd be renewed with trust that God has provided for all of our needs. So let's go straight into the 6th need of a person, which is our reliance on God for the world to come. And let's talk about the world to come in Jewish philosophy. Now, let us take up the 6th group, the reward in this world and the next that a person merits by his good deeds in this world. This takes 2 forms. The reward in this world alone, which we just spoke about earlier, and the reward in the next world alone. Sometimes a person merits both on account of a single deed. This matter was not explained to us in detail. Rather, the Creator promised his people general reward for general observance. That's what we kind of get in the Torah. For example, it says that for honoring your parents, and for chasing away the mother bird, which is a special mitzvah that you're not allowed to take the eggs of a mother bird unless you chase her away first. For the mitzvah of honoring your parents and the mitzvah of chasing away the mother bird, you will live a long life. That's what the Torah says, v'harachta yamim, right? Now, the Talmud tells us a story in Tractate Kiddushin of a rabbi. His name was Elisha ben Avuya, who saw a father command his son to climb a ladder and chase away a mother bird to take away the eggs. So the boy dutifully fulfilled the command of his father, thus fulfilling not one but two mitzvahs, honoring his father, and number two, chasing away the mother bird. While he's up there, he falls from the ladder and he dies. Rabbi Elisha ben Avuya was so shaken by this episode where the explicit promise of the Torah was not true, the guy died, that he actually gave up his faith. It's one of the most radical stories in the Talmud. He gave up his faith and he became a heretic. At the end of his life, he repented, but whatever, it's a long story. And the commentaries explain that what that is referring to, and the mistake that the rabbi was making, is not that it was necessarily a promise of reward in this world, a long life in this world. It could be a reward of long life in the world which is forever, which is the next world. And that was the mistake that he was not understanding. So the kid went straight to heaven, so to speak, as opposed to living a long life in this world. And that's how you see the reward of the world to come being hinted in the Torah, but certainly not explicit. We'll find, for example, the Torah says, then Moses and the children of Israel will sing this song. This is when they cross the Red Sea, time of reward, of joy, of happiness. And that is many times explained in the oral law to be referring to the future, the coming of Mashiach, which is different, by the way, to heaven. From this world we die, we separate from our bodies, and we go to heaven, which is a spiritual world. But when Mashiach comes, our souls will be reunited with our bodies, and we will experience then resurrection in this world. And that is when it says that Moses and the Jewish people will sing the song. That is, they'll sing the song in this physical world. So there's a spiritual world called Gan Eden, the reward of heaven. And then there's Olam Haba, which is the next world. That's talking about the resurrection, where we will continue to live a physical life, reunited with our bodies through resurrection, a life where no longer will we struggle with any suffering, no evil, no harm, no illness, no death. Okay? So God gives us a very general reward for general observance, but does not get into the details. It did not state specific rewards for specific acts of service in this world, as he did in regard to punishment for transgression. Now, this is not really fair, because when it comes to punishment, they go into great detail. The Torah tells us in great detail all those punishments which are in store for us, where he states which acts make one liable to stoning, to burning, to decapitation or strangling, 40 lashes, death, premature death, payment of a monetary fine, twofold, fourfold, fivefold. So there's all sorts of punishments that face us when we when we do the wrong thing, which is why a lot of people, Bible critics, will think that God is a very vengeful God, right? But it doesn't really tell us about the eternal reward, payment for damages by an ox, a pit, whatever. But of reward and punishment in the next world, the prophet has told us nothing in his book for several reasons. Now, what we're going to go through now is a total of 7 reasons, which will explain to us why the reward of the world to come is not mentioned in the Torah. And when we go through these reasons, we'll be getting a lot of context as to what is the nature of the next world. That's what's so fascinating about studying the gates of trust, because it really gives us some context on matters that we don't really have other context on. Okay? The first of 7 reasons why we are not told explicitly in the Torah the reward of the world to come is because material man cannot fathom the spiritual. We could not relate to the reward if the Torah was going to be explicit with us as to why or what we were going to be experiencing. Just a quick example of this. So, the prophets tell us about the coming of the Mashiach. So they tell us, let's say Prophet Isaiah says, we'll go to Israel on the wings of eagles. Now that sounds pretty fanciful. It sounds like somebody was smoking weed or something when they said that, wings of eagles. But now we realize, since the Wright brothers at Kitty Hawk, we realize that what Isaiah was probably talking about was Boeing 787 Dreamliners, which kind of look like eagles flying in the sky when you're 3,000 years ago, when you're trying to describe something to people 3,000 years ago. What else was he supposed to have said? Yeah, you'll be flying to Israel on airplanes. What? You'll be flying to Israel on El Al and JetBlue. They wouldn't have a clue what he's talking about. So he says, well, it sort of looks like an eagle. It's the best way I can describe it to you. And the way, there he was describing to us something which we couldn't possibly relate to for a couple thousand years. Many of the prophecies of the future time are like that. For example, when they tell us that the wolf shall lie with the lamb, does that mean that the nations of the world will be experiencing peace? Mortal enemies will learn to get along with each other? That's probably what it means. But we're not even clear because we can't relate to that time. And if that's talking about a time of a physical reward, how much more so when it comes to a world of spiritual reality that we couldn't relate to? So at least when it comes to the world of Mashiach, which comes after Mashiach comes, right? After Mashiach comes, we're resurrected back into our bodies. And there we are living this physical life. If we couldn't relate to the physical rewards of that world and we needed metaphors, how much more so when it comes to the time between this life and the coming of the Mashiach, when we're waiting up in heaven in the spiritual world, souls only. Certainly we have no idea how to relate to that. And that's the first of 7 reasons why the Torah doesn't tell us about the spiritual reward of that world. Just like the breastplate with lights and sound that the priest wore that answered questions, that's today's iPhone. Exactly. So the high priest would wear a breastplate which had 12 stones on it. And whenever the people had a question, a very important question, like going to war or not going to war, they would ask the high priest, and the various stones would light up on his chest, and he'd read sort of this, like interpret the answer. So that it's difficult for us to understand what that was. Was that an iPad? Maybe it was an iPad. Who knows? I mean, it was like a thing with lighting numbers on it, So yeah, there's a lot of things that we couldn't relate to. By the way, there's actually a great story of a rabbi in France who had a light that didn't burn on oil a few hundred years ago. He was a Kabbalist. Was that an electric light? Don't know. Maybe. It's a good story. So let's look at this reason inside the text of here: reward and punishment in the world to come. So the first reason is, one of these is that the form of the soul apart from the body is unknown to us. We can't relate to the soul when it's separated from the body. Still less do we know what brings it to light in that state or causes it to suffer. Let's just discuss this for a moment. So somebody passes away. The moment somebody passes away, we don't know how to relate to them anymore. We feel a tremendous sense of loss and void and separation and abandonment and rejection because, they're not here anymore. So what do? We try to make a wake so that we can see them. Maybe we'll, amongst the Gentiles, the newest fashion craze is to make these really high-end funerals. If the guy likes to go on a motorbike, they'll bury him in a glass box on a motorbike, or playing the piano, or maybe smoking a cigar or playing golf or something. That's how they'll bury the guy, standing propped up with all sorts of thingamajigs, as if we're kind of attributing physical properties and enjoyment to a soul that is no longer invested in a body. So we're trying to perpetuate the soul's existence in the body when the soul's gone already. It's out of here. And maybe it makes us feel good to see that, but that's not the Jewish way in death and mourning. What you're supposed to do is, the moment of death, you're supposed to switch from a physical relationship to a spiritual relationship, which is why many people that never came to shul will suddenly start coming to shul to say Kaddish 3 times a day. Many people in this forum connected to their shul, to our shul, only when somebody passed away in their lives, because they started to form a spiritual relationship with their parents and loved ones after they passed away. And that was a novelty. So at least we have the Torah to guide us about how we're supposed to mourn a loved one. But to know what they're experiencing, forget about it. That's totally out of our league. At least we know you're supposed to sit Shiva 7 days. You're supposed to 30 days of mourning, 12 months of mourning. You're supposed to say Kaddish for 11 months. You're supposed to light a Yortzei candle. You're supposed to do sort of things. At least we have some sort of a framework of how things that we can do to aid the spiritual elevation of the soul, sponsoring a Kiddush, giving tzedakah, that kind of stuff. But to know what they're experiencing, there's no way we can possibly relate. It's a little bit, in my analogy that would be, try to describe Beethoven, try to describe music to a deaf person. Try to describe color to a blind person. Just think about this for a moment. Describe the color red to a deaf person, to a blind person. You don't even know where to start. They're blind. You're like, it's hot. I don't know. I wouldn't even know where to start. That's the reason, friends, why the first of 7 reasons why the Torah doesn't tell us the reward of the world to come. God did, however, explain this to those who could understand its meaning. As he said to Joshua, I will let you walk among those who stand there. That's a reference to angels, by the way. Those who stand is angels. The reason when we daven the Amidah, the silent Amidah, we put our feet together as if to show that we have one foot. Because angels, where they are, is where they stay forever. They don't progress. Because they only have a good inclination. They never have to overcome any challenges. They have no freedom of choice. So where they are, how they created is where they stay. Humans are lower than the angels, but we have 2 feet. Because we compete, we have freedom of choice. Animal soul, godly soul, evil inclination, good inclination, and therefore we can move, we can progress further. So we are called walkers, and they are called stationary beings. When God says, I will let you walk among those who stand there, that means I'll let you, Joshua, human being, freedom of choice, dwell amongst those who stay put, which is amongst the angels, right? Good. This was not to be while his soul was still joined to his body, but was an allusion to the state after death. When the soul in its simple and refined condition, divested of the body and no longer using it, assumes the form of angels, if it was purified and radiant, and its deeds were good in this world. And that's, friends, the first reason why the Torah does not tell us of spiritual reward at all. And now we're on to the second reason. Hopefully you're good with that reason, because I'm not hearing any critique, any comments. Let's see, comments coming in. Daniel is welcoming David and Sarah. Hi, David. Nice to see you. Welcome to Bada Palm Beach Gardens, to our Torah study. Great to have you with us. And Michelle, welcome. Good. So that was the first reason that the Torah does not tell us the spiritual reward in the Torah, of the reward of the next world. By the way, just quick thing I have to tell you is that the belief in the world to come is something which science itself supports. You know, when you realize the law of the conservation of energy, I think it's called the first law of thermodynamics or the third law of thermodynamics. I'm not sure which one. But the law of the conservation of energy is that energy is never lost. Energy doesn't just terminate. It just changes forms from dynamic to kinetic to electric to some other form of energy. Energy is never lost. It just switches forms. So to say that our lives suddenly terminate upon death is irrational. It actually is irrational. You have to say that it changes into another form, what we call a spiritual form, right? And that's something which science itself supports. It's never created or lost. Thank you, Marty. That's what it means. Never created or lost. And therefore, science itself supports the concept of the law of the conservation of energy, that there is a world behind this world, after this world, right? But here's where the spiritual reward is shared with us. And that's the second explanation now, which is was better to transmit it via the oral Torah. It was the oral Torah that tells us about the reward of the world to come. Remember, there's the written Torah, the 5 books of Moses, which we received on Mount Sinai. Together with that written form was the oral Torah, which is the explanation of everything that's written in the written Torah, in the 5 books of Moses. That became known as the Mishnah, the Talmud, the Gemara, and the Medrash, and that all is the oral explanation of what's in the written Torah. And there we are given the reward in the spiritual world. Another reason is that the doctrine of the reward and punishment in the world to come was received by the common people from the prophets in the form of the oral tradition, and was grasped by the wise through their intellectual faculties. Now, the reason for this is obvious. Why do we need an oral Torah? Why do we even need an oral Torah? Why couldn't God write everything down in the written Torah, and we wouldn't have to struggle with this 3,000 years later about whether the oral Torah is really true or the oral Torah is made up by the rabbis? We wouldn't have to struggle. Why couldn't God put everything down in writing? The reason, my friends, is because you cannot explain everything in writing. Many subjects need context. If you were to describe how to run your business, if you had to disappear from this world tomorrow, God forbid, and you had to explain to your son how to take over your business, could you do everything in writing? Would that be possible to put everything in writing? I want you to think about that for a moment. Rob, I'm thinking of you and your clients, right? So you've got very nuanced and complex relationships with many, many people, right? A lot of things you can't put in writing. They're too nuanced. I wonder if you agree with me on this. Marty, you were involved in international mergers and acquisitions and all sorts of political relationships that you brokered. Could you possibly put that all in writing and just give it to me, and now I'll be able to totally take over and fill your shoes? I don't think it's possible, because yes, there's a part of it you can put in writing, but then you need to be trained in. You need to see, observe, and listen and watch me to be able to understand how I operate. And I'm glad you agree with me, Marty. You need to be able to see the context of how to operate to be able to put things in the right perspective, right? You can't just say a one-size-fits-all. Client calls, you do A, B, C, and then you're done. It doesn't work like that. Depends. There's a million options here. And that's why you need an oral Torah to explain the context, what's not sayable, what's not writable in the written Torah. And that's exactly why the oral Torah is the one that tells us about the spiritual rewards of the world to come, because it's too abstract to put in writing. How are you going to describe the spiritual rewards of the world to come in writing? You're going to say, it's again describing music to a deaf person. Can't. You need someone to sit there with you for 3 hours and describe to you what music might feel like, what it doesn't feel like, what sound is. And that's how you start to get the relationship with this business, right? That's the reason on-the-job training in the oral Torah, Andy, correct. That's the reason that the oral Torah is the one that teaches us the rewards of the world to come. So let's do that inside the text here. Another reason is that the doctrine of reward and punishment in the world to come was received by the common people from the prophets in the form of oral tradition and was grasped by the wise through their intellectual faculties. Here they were able to relate to it with questions and context and understanding and contrast and exclusions. They could relate. Sometimes you need a coach. Why do you need a rabbi? Why do I need to be here? Why couldn't you just take this book, read it, and then I'm just redundant. I'm completely unnecessary. Because you need someone to walk you through, like in a museum. You need a curator. You need someone to explain to you, this you're not ready for, this is good for you, you're already there, you're not there yet, you're doing this right, you're doing this wrong, this you're way off, this you're better than I could have imagined. You need someone that kind of customizes it for you. Just like you need me as a rabbi, so too you need you as a lawyer. You need a doctor. Why do you need a doctor? Maybe just read the book and heal yourself, right? No, you need someone to walk you through custom, to make it yours, to make you connected on a deep level. They therefore did not mention it in scriptures, just as they did not mention much of the exposition of the commandments and the duties of the mitzvahs, because they relied on the tradition. I think that's a pretty good reason as to why the Torah doesn't tell us about something which is essentially unrelatable to us. That's why it's not in the written Torah. That's why it's in the oral Torah. And that, my friends, is the second of 7 reasons why the reward of the world to come of Gan Eden, of heaven, is not explicitly written in the Torah. And with that, I'm going to conclude today's Gates of Trust, which is developing a whole new direction, as you can tell. We'll carry on Wednesday with this. Tomorrow is Day of Tanya, but today we'll carry on right now, a few more minutes, with the study of meditation and prayer. So we are studying the book, the prayer of the Shema Yisrael. Okay, just before I carry on, I see this comment. Even when you put something in writing and you think you covered everything, a year later something comes up that no one thought about, or the parties have a different view, that's why you need judges. Beautiful, Rob. Thank you. And I hope that you can understand why the oral Torah is so absolutely necessary, and why someone that comes to you and tells you that the oral Torah is merely made up by the rabbis is exhibiting a fundamental misunderstanding of how tradition can possibly be transmitted amongst humans and mortals, right? This is why God chose to give us the Torah in the form of a two formats, written and oral, so that we can, get the context all along the way. So we always have a teacher. By the way, it was the Romans We just studied this with my kids on Shabbos, so beautiful. The Romans were the ones who understood this idea that the oral Torah was the essence of what is keeping Judaism alive. And in their efforts to uproot Judaism, here's what they did. They banned rabbinical ordination. They figured that if they cut the chain of tradition, today I'm a rabbi ordained all the way back to Moses, who got ordained by God in Mount Sinai, right? But if they could break that tradition, if they could make a generation or two where there were no rabbis, then the rabbis would never have been ordained anymore. Nobody would feel qualified to teach the masses, the people. And then we would have lost the power of the oral tradition, and Judaism would become an antiquated text, like a Rosetta Stone of sorts, that we can't really understand and we can't really relate to as a living, breathing, dynamic document. And that's what they were trying to do. It was Rabbi Yehuda ben Bava, who was a very, who gave his life. He took 5 scholars, the 5 surviving students of Rabbi Akiva, to a mountain pass, a very narrow mountain pass. He put the 5 students behind him. He wedged himself in the mountain. He gave them semicha, rabbinic ordination, in violation of the Roman order, while the Romans were hot on his heels. And there he made sure that Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai of Lag BaOmer, the author of the Zohar, Rabbi Yossi ben Chalafta, Rabbi Meir, Rabbi Yehuda, and Rabbi Lazar ben Shamua, these 5 sages were the continuation of Judaism in the decimation that we experienced during the Roman era. The Romans were hot on his heels. They tried to catch these 5 rabbis to kill him, but they couldn't because he wedged himself in the mountain. They pierced his body with spears. His body was like a sieve by the time they were done piercing him, but the rabbis got away and Judaism survived. So this essentially, my friends, is what the Romans understood held the key to the survival of Judaism, and I hope that you can understand why it's so important for us to be able to accept and study the oral Torah. By the way, I believe that on Sunday night, I'm going to be giving a special session to the Global JLI Jewish Learning Institute, the Global JLI platform. I'll be giving a short 15 or 20-minute class on the connection between Shavuos and the oral Torah, why we read the book of Ruth on Shavuos, and why the book of Ruth on Shavuos is so important, because it teaches us the essence of our connection, not only to the written Torah, which we received from God on Mount Sinai, but also to the oral Torah, which we received from God on Mount Sinai as well. So stay tuned for that. I think it's going to be Sunday night at 8 o'clock. Susan, where can we learn more about the world to come? Is there a book you can recommend that writes about that? Stay tuned. Watch this space, Susan, because right here is where you're going to be learning more about the oral Torah, about the world to come, than you will be in many, many other books. That's what's so great about Duties of the Heart, the Gates of Trust. With that,